What is the most stupidest way you've heard someone die? I saw one on YouTube of this guy who had to do community service after some small crime he did. But he didn't want to do that, of course. So his brilliant idea of how to get out it was tying 2 pillows to his back, and his friend shot him in the back. Thinking the pillows would protect him just enough to where he would get injured but not life-threatening. Yeah, he died and his friend was charged with murder. Lamau. A few years back some guy tried to kill his girlfriend by parking the car on the tracks and jumping out of the car. The train came and hit the car spins around and hits the guy. Guy dies, girl survives. I just looked up this article and apparently the guy was trying to kill himself and his girlfriend but was ejected from the car on impact. The initial account was revised after new information. Steve Jobs had a very treatable form of cancer but decided to try and cure it with an all-fruit diet. Literally, all he had to do was go to the doctor when it was discovered, and his chances of survival would have been quite good. This is a highly underrated submission. The guy had plenty of money to get the best possible health care in the world and just chose nah. Until it got real serious, then there just happened to be a liver available to transplant right away. The worst part of it is that he had pancreatic cancer. The pancreas is what allows us to process sugar via the creation of insulin and other chemicals. So, he stressed the organ that had cancer by eating an all-fruit diet, which is very high in sugar. An all-fruit diet can damage a healthy pancreas, never mind a cancerous one. While Ashton Kutcher was playing Steve Jobs for a movie, he attempted to follow Jobs' all-fruit diet and was hospitalized with pancreatitis. The husband of a friend of mine died by drowning at the beach. He was having an affair and skipped work to spend the day with his side chick. She could swim, he couldn't. They went to a local beach famous for its jetty that people love to jump off. Despite all the warnings not to, he jumped and sank like a stone. His wife was unaware that he had been having an affair. Why the fuck would someone, 1, go to a beach at all, and 2, jump off a jetty into open water if they can't fucking swim? What a moron. Feel bad for his wife though, damn. I am guessing they went to the beach on a weekday because it was a nice day and they thought they would have some privacy. He may have jumped off the jetty to show off in front of his girlfriend. It was somewhat surreal watching the news and seeing the chopper in the sky searching for his body. Guy was killed in South Carolina this past 4th after putting a lit firework on his head and letting it go off. 4 guys died this way this year. 4. Gary Hoy, January 28, 1954, July 9, 1993, was a Canadian lawyer who died when he fell from the 24th floor of his office building at the Toronto Dominion Centre in Toronto, Ontario. In an attempt to prove to a group of prospective articling students that the building's glass windows were unbreakable, he threw himself against the glass. The glass did not break when he hit it, but the window frame gave way and Hoy fell to his death. Yes, I remember that. Apparently, he would do it often, especially when new people were hired. It was like his trick. Until it wasn't. That idiot who had his girlfriend shoot him point blank range with a .50 calories handgun while he was holding an encyclopedia book in front of his chest, so they could go viral. That one of 3 morons that taunted the Siberian tiger at the San Francisco Zoo. In 1989, a kid was eaten by a polar bear at the Prospect Park Zoo in New York City after jumping into its pool to cool off during a heat wave. This kid was 12, in his defense. The NYPD shot the bear, and now there's no more bears at that zoo. My older sister was a baby at the time, and my mom put a teddy bear in a toddler-sized Prospect Park Zoo t-shirt, stitched a shoelace to the corner of its mouth, and turned this into an instructional story about why we don't cross the fences at the zoo. Consequently, for decades, I thought she was making this up, until my sister found the New York Times article from when it happened. Paying $250,000 to go to the bottom of the ocean in an unregulated fiberglass capsule. Yes, it's rare. On the opposite end, many people die each year when they pay $50,000. Edit, I may be wrong about the number, to wait in a queue while their bottled oxygen runs out at the top of Mount Everest. 17 people died in 2023. A few weeks ago at my nearby amusement park, a man dropped his keys on a roller coaster. The workers said they could find them for him when the park closed. That wasn't good enough for him, I guess, so then he proceeded to climb over several fences with tons of signs saying danger and do not enter, to try to get his keys and was immediately hit by the coaster. A similar thing happened at Six Flags over Georgia back in like 2008 or 2009. The ride was one of those where you are seated and have over-the-shoulder restraints but your legs are free and dangling. A guy jumped a fence to retrieve his hat. The ride came through, and one of the riders kicked the guy in the head. The guy got decapitated and the rider shattered both of her legs. Couple took their 4-month-old kid out in a boat in 120-degree Fahrenheit weather to celebrate the 4th of July. Kid died of heat exposure. Parents were surprised. And the parents have raised $50,000 so far on GoFundMe. Police have opened an investigation. Drove home drunk, used the automatic garage door opener and closed himself in the garage, car still running, then passed out. They found him in the morning when he didn't come to work. Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller tells a story from his single days wherein he drove home after the show, taking a cell phone call on the way. He got home, got out of the car, finished his call, did his bedtime routine, and went to bed. Problem 1, he neglected to turn off the car. Problem 2, his bedroom was directly above the garage. Obviously, he woke up, feeling rather sick, and eventually figured out what was happening. But he says that his friends would be arguing still today whether it was depression or stupidity had he died that night. A girl a few towns over was mooning a train, but was a little too close, and the train spanked her into the afterlife. I think it broke her spine and she died on impact or pretty quick, but I feel bad for the parents having to explain to people the embarrassing cause while also going through that grief. She was 16 or 17. Hold your wee for a wee. A 28-year-old woman died from water intoxication trying to get a game console with a list price of $250. The story about the utterly cavalier irresponsibility of the DJs who held the contest is particularly appalling. At one point, a nurse contacted the station and informed the DJs that the contest could be dangerous and potentially fatal. The DJs responded by saying, "We're aware of that," and said that the contestants had signed releases and couldn't file a lawsuit. I remember that. Heard the tape of the DJs being blasé about it, then laughing while saying, "They all signed a release so we're off the hook," or something similar. Just gross. Don't worry, they did in fact get sued and had to pay out $16 million. Some contracts aren't legally binding because they can lead to things that are illegal, like death is one such thing. The guy that was going to jump into some alligator-infested water, his friends told him not to because of said gators. His last words were, "Fuck them gators," before jumping in and being immediately shredded. Lol. My wife and I were reading this thread and she mentioned this. Beaumont, Texas. I read a few times, I keep going back and rereading it. Some dad was playing a practical joke on his daughter, and pretending to fall off the edge of the Grand Canyon. He lost his footing and fell for real. His daughter was now an orphan. She had no mom. What a complete moron and unnecessary death. You've probably seen the video of this if you've ever used Instagram, but some old lady in 2012 died from taking a shopping cart onto an escalator and sorta turning into one of those snowballs in old cartoons and rolling down. I worked as an EMT for 10 years and often got called to the local mall where old people had done this with carts, scooters, wheelchairs, etc. Seemed like it was always Macy's. Kid at my high school died because him and his friends were taking turns hitting each other in the head with a skateboard. They just kept hitting each other harder and harder until they reached too hard, and killed the kid. I did grow up in the time of Jackass, but I'll never understand this one. One of my third cousins had a gender reveal party. Her husband accidentally made a pipe bomb that killed his mom. Now every time someone even so much as mentions a gender reveal, this is one of the first stories brought up. It was a boy, by the way. What was the purpose for it? I think it was supposed to do like the pink or blue smoke in the air. Not entirely sure. Turned his mom into a pink cloud, that's original. Too bad it was a boy. That was brutal. I'm telling my husband, he'll laugh. When I was a child, a neighbor was a very bad husband and father, emotionally abusing his family. One of his tricks was, during a feat of anger, to dramatically stand in the garden and point his revolver at his head, at the last moment lift the barrel upward and shoot towards the sky. He did it from time to time, not frequently, but it happened. One day, he didn't lift the barrel high enough and what happens when one plays with firearms happened. Wow, That's nuts. Stupid people do stupid things. My father was a nurse and at home that day. He intervened, but the guy was probably already lukewarm meat before my father even reached his body. I was young and have little memories of the man. I just remember that he was handsome and looked cool to my 5-year-old self. I don't even think I was at home when the event happened. In my memories, I just one day heard my parents talking about the event and, at that moment, realizing that indeed, I didn't see him for years. There's the airline pilot who let his kids fly the plane and the plane crashed. Took a bunch of people with him. If I remember correctly, both of his kids were in the cockpit where he was letting his son sit in the pilot's seat and pretend to steer, thinking the autopilot was on and something was locked so the kid couldn't actually affect anything. Apparently the kid was able to move the controls enough to disengage the autopilot and nobody noticed right away, again because the distractions, and once they did, they tried to regain control of it but couldn't. There's actually a really interesting animation showing the plane's movements through the air as they attempted to regain control and eventually crashed. I've heard someone died bungee jumping because they thought the staff said for the person to jump. Person's turn wasn't even up and was not even connected. I saw the video of this. Girl wanted to go with her boyfriend. She had backed out a couple times previously but was determined to go through with it this time. It was off an old railroad bridge in South America if I recall correctly. They waited for hours for their turn. The staff strapped him up first and she was going to be next. The staff told him to jump but she mistakenly thought they were talking to her and she leapt off the bridge instead. A neighbor went up on his roof to put up Christmas lights during a thunderstorm, at night, alone. I never found out if he slipped, got hit by lightning or what, but he fell 3 fucking stories onto his driveway and someone found him dead the next morning. I mean, does nobody remember Mr. Hands? Dude dies of peritonitis due to the perforated colon he got from getting fucked by a horse. Yup. Ex-Boeing engineer. Injured his senses in a motorcycle accident and took to getting fucked in the ass by a horse that he and his buddies called Big Dick. He did it for 2 years, I believe. Then one day, the horse wasn't into it, according to the police, stabbed a secondary orifice into his asshole, and he died before he got to the hospital. Makes me wonder whatever happened to the horse. British cop tasered a guy who had poured petrol over himself and was threatening to torch himself. NYPD tasered a mentally ill man in crisis who was standing on a fire escape, maybe 20 feet up. He hadn't hurt anyone or committed any crimes, but they wanted him to come down. So they tased him. And he came down, right on his head. I don't think any charges were filed. How could they possibly have known he would fall? At the Pittsburgh Zoo, a mother held her 2-year-old up over a barrier above the African wild dogs, also known as Cape hunting dogs, habitat so he could see and lost her grip on him. He fell into the habitat and was mauled and died. They got rid of the dogs afterwards and there was a massive settlement in favor of the mom, I believe. I went to a place called Alligator World or something like that, and at feeding time, everyone can stand in a viewing area that's like a bridge over where the alligators eat. There was signs up with the rules, and even an announcement, don't put your small kids on your shoulders for them to see the feeding, the kid could fall in. It was in Myrtle Beach, everything was in English, the people around us all spoke English, we were all American, and this tall dad, who didn't seem to be an idiot, apparently was an idiot. He picked up his small toddler on his shoulders so she could watch the feeding. The announcer screamed at the man, put your kid down, you can't have your kids on your shoulders during the feeding. And the guy acted offended and as if the announcer lady was a bitch, and put his kid down. Luckily nothing bad happened, but it so could have been bad. The protection fence wasn't extremely tall, he certainly could have dropped his toddler in during the feeding. And the gators go vicious while eating. A serial killer accidentally killed himself by stabbing his own leg when attacking someone. He died doing what he loved, stabbing people. Frat boy decided to pull a prank by climbing down another fraternity's chimney, unaware that they narrowed. He got stuck and suffocated, I think. His body was found when the other frat boys opened the fireplace flue and his shoes fell down. Is this the one that happened at Cornell in the 90s? It was in 93 at Cornell. I watched a Mr. Ballin video the other day where he talked about a guy who did something similar in Florida. He decided to rob a house and climbed down the chimney and got stuck. The house was for sale and nobody lived there. A couple days later a couple came in for a showing and saw the legs dangling in the fireplace and thought it was some weird spooky decoration. Guy dropped his keys in a manhole, went head in to retrieve them, fell in and could not lift himself up. There was about 40 centimeters of water on the bottom. He drowned. Some said it. Every episode of 1000 Ways to Die. Cruise ship jumpers. Poisonous/venomous spider and snake collector that would let them freely roam his house. US girl was on a safari in Africa on a boat tour. Sign said keep all hands in the boat due to crocs, stuck her hand in water and was immediately grabbed and killed in front of her family. This isn't the stupidest I've read on here, but a friend of mine died after falling down the stairs drunk. She was so fun to hang out with, and yes, she fell a bunch when she was drinking. It was always hilarious until it wasn't. Fucking stupid. I miss you, girl. I suspect my Nana accidentally poisoned herself with essential oils. She was always very fit and healthy but, as she got older, started getting into weird and kind of obnoxious health fads. One of them was essential oils which a friend got her into. She was only in her early 70s when she died. About a year before her death she started to get lots of symptoms like headaches and itchy skin, but the doctors couldn't pinpoint why. Then one day she got, what everyone thought was, a flu. But then she deteriorated rapidly. She went into hospital and was basically told, "You're dying, and we don't know why." They couldn't do anything to stop it. Their plan was essentially let her die, then do an autopsy and maybe learn why. Her body just shut down over the next week. I live out of town but came to be by her side, along with my family, for her death. After she died, everyone was back at my grandparents' house supporting my granddad. I noticed a bottle of eucalyptus oil in the kitchen next to the tea and coffee. Eucalyptus oil is poisonous to consume. I knew this because I'd recently gone down an online rabbit hole of MLMs and, specifically, people literally poisoning themselves and their families with essential oils. I mentioned it to my granddad and the oil definitely wasn't his. Unfortunately, by that point, it was too late as the autopsy had already been done. Apparently, to check for poisons they have to test for specific things, which they only do if they suspect a specific poison. We'll never know for sure but I'm convinced.